Hello and welcome to the show that debates the top news story of the day. You're watching The Big Picture. Odisha legislator Jina Hikaka, who had been kidnapped by Maoists more than a month ago, was finally released today. When asked whether he would resign from his post if he would fail to get the Maoist demands fulfilled, Mr. Hikaka did not give a straight reply. He said that he would abide by the decision taken by the People's Court that was organized by his abductors. Now, the Maoists have demanded the release of 29 persons from jail. The state government, however, had agreed to facilitate the release of 25 persons. Hikaka has told the Maoists' version of a trial court, the Praja Court, that he would resign as MLA and also sever his ties with the BJD, live the life of an ordinary person and work for the tribals. The Maoists insisting on Hikaka's resignation has come a setback for BJD and fueled the possibility of Maoist-backed Chasi Mulia Adivasi Sangh or CMAS President Nachika Linga contesting polls from Lakshmipur in the future. Tonight on The Big Picture, we discuss the new direction the insurgency is taking, especially in Orissa. We also try and get to the root of the discontent in states like Orissa and neighboring Andhra Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. In addition, we pose this question to our eminent panel. Are ineffective social and economic delivery mechanisms the root cause of discontent among the poor and downtrodden? I'm Athar Khan, and joining me tonight in the studio is Nigamanand Pusty, Chief of Bureau of Dharitri, Prakash Singh, retired Director General of the BSF. Also joining us in a bit on the show will be Panda. I think he's already joined us. Panda, Senior Leader of the BJD, also member of the Lok Sabha. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. If I'd like to start the show with Panda, if I could, and I'll come to you, my studio guest. Mr. Panda, thank you for being on the show, first of all. Now, abduction seems to be the new preferred method of the Maoist rebels. What we are witnessing is now an increasing shift to selective high-value targets. Would you describe this as a shift in the Maoists' overall strategy against the state, and is it in fact making them stronger?
Well, I think you're right about one thing, which is that we are seeing an increased number of abductions. And you may be right that it may signal a different tactic or a different strategy that the Maoists might be taking up. But let us not lose sight of the big picture, which is that throughout in India and including Odisha, the number of attacks, the number of deaths, the incidents of violence, the trend is that they have been coming down. If you look at the last decade, the peak was around 2008, and at least in Odisha for the last 4 years, there has been a very significant reduction in the number of incidents of violence and of deaths. So I think it could be, as some people have said, a shift in tactics towards which we have had a few incidents that each have been treated on their own merit, but perhaps it is time to have a national debate about a comprehensive approach, not just for Odisha, but for all the states which are facing this.
Fair point, Mr. Panda. Fair point, Mr. Panda. We'll come back to you on that. Let me get in my studio guests into the picture. Prakash Singh, you're former director of the BSF. You have some experience in dealing with insurgencies. Do you agree with what Mr. Panda says, that there seems to be a shift in the Maoist strategy, and is that actually helping them? Do you agree with him?
See, the overall strategy remains the same. There is no change in that. But tactics, they keep on changing. You see, what has happened during the last few months, that the security forces' presence over a period of 2 years now, that is beginning to have its impact on the overall situation in the Naxal affected areas. And we found that in the year 2011, there was a substantial drop in the number of incidents. I mean, the number of incidents used to be above more than 1,000. They came down to just about 600. Over 1,000 casualties were reported in 2010. That came down to 600. And the total number of incidents from about 2,200 came to about 1,600 or so. I mean, that's the overall picture of the Naxal affected states. So the security forces operations, even if they were not offensive enough, it was more of a holding operation. It started having its impact. And then early this year, in the month of March, the security forces launched an operation which had never been experimented or never tried before.
You're talking about Green Hunt, of course.
No, I'm not talking about Green Hunt. In fact, there's nothing like Green Hunt. Let's be clear about it. It's all a creation of the media. I'm talking about an operation which the CRPF undertook for the first time in the history of independent India in the Abujmad area.
Right.
Because that area, the Maoists claimed it as their liberated zone. There's no government presence there. There's no police station. There's no revenue outpost.
So you're saying there's no overall change in strategy, but tactics might change.
Tactically, no. All this meant a lot of pressure on the Maoists. and then about half their top leadership, half the central committee members, half the Politburo members, they were all accounted for. I mean, either killed or arrested. So the Maoists felt they need to change their tactics, and therefore they started resort to these abductions.
Kidnappings and abductions.
And they found that this is the easiest and the simplest way, A, to get your demands conceded,
Right.
B, your cadres released from prison, C, cases against your men withdrawn from courts.
Right. Fair point. Let me come to Mr. Pusty here. You, of course, are part of an Oriya daily. Abduction as a tactic is something that Maoists have tried in Andhra Pradesh as well. But we all know that didn't really work out for them as such in Andhra. They eroded their base as well. The people weren't really happy with them. Why then? And are they trying this exact same tactic in a neighboring state of Odisha? Why are they changing tactics to something that hasn't really worked for them before?
So, I entirely agree with some extent my neighbor. So what has been actually said here, the abduction now they have resorted to the new tactics, that is the abduction. So they have completely now failed in Andhra Pradesh, and now they have shifted their base. Most of their leaders, they have now shifted to Odisha. So now they are adopting a new tactics, and to some extent I agree with Mr. J. Panda, what he said, that the number of incidents have come down. But now the pressure is on the Maoist. So the government here, the government of Odisha, there is no now clear strategy on the part of the state government and the center. So there is no concerted efforts between the two governments. So what I say in this program is that, so now the two governments, the question is now what will happen after this? This will affect the morale of the security forces, because after this incident. So the government and the center both have to adopt a concerted approach, or they will work together to say that this threat is eliminated. They cannot eliminate, but to some extent this can be minimized. So then they have to now change their strategy to counter this, because today there was an abduction, there may be another abduction tomorrow. So then the government, how many times the government will bow to their demands?
Right. Let me put the same question to Mr. Panda, if I could. Mr. Panda, on the question of whether to negotiate with the Maoist rebels or not, civil society argues that the state needs to negotiate not just when there's a hostage situation, but also should address the issues that these Maoist rebels come up with, what they want to highlight. Where do you stand? Where does your party stand on the issue of negotiating with Maoist insurgents?
Well, first of all, when you talk about negotiating in the middle of a crisis, that itself is a very complicated issue. We know that even so-called hard states like Israel, which officially have a no negotiation policy, even they in certain crises actually change their policy temporarily, and they have negotiations and in fact have released people or had prisoner exchanges. Now, in terms of negotiating when there is no crisis, of course, the Odisha government has always had an approach that as long as Maoists are willing to give up violence, we are completely open to negotiating anything and to addressing their concerns. But let's also not forget that the reduction that has happened in Maoist incidents, it is not only because of security measures. Security measures have contributed to it, but also a lot of developmental effort has gone on. And the state government's policies of addressing the poorest of the citizens, particularly in tribal areas, has had some positive results. So I think in terms of negotiating during general times, there is always an open approach, and during crises, I think one has to see it with the merit of each situation, because while there are consequences to negotiating, there are equally consequences to not negotiating.
Right, Mr. Panda. You raise a very important point, that of negotiating with the Maoist rebels, also the security measures that have been taken by the state and central governments. We'll take a short breather here, gentlemen. We'll come back after a short break and we'll discuss this various security measures that have taken place by either the state government or the central government to counter this threat of Maoist rebels. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture, and we're discussing the threat of Maoism in the interior parts of the country. Mr. Pusty, if I could come to you this right now. In the break, we were talking about something. Do we all agree here on the panel, including Mr. Panda, that the root cause of Maoist insurgency making such an impactful comeback in the state lies in the ineffectiveness of the state's policy? By state, I mean the country, to alleviate the long-suffering people in these areas, ineffective delivery systems, be it as it may, whether social or political or even economic betterment. Do you think the root cause lies there?
The root cause is no doubt that is the delivery mechanism, that is the development procedure, developmental works. The thing is this, now just as Panda was saying that it is not exactly, it is not only the security measures, only the developmental measures taken by the undertaking. To some extent, he may be correct. But in that area, the areas affected by the Maoist activities, hardly any developmental works have taken place. So there is, no one has seen any development here. So that is the problem with this. So that's why the poorer sections of the society, the Adivasis, the Chasis and other sections, they are gradually attracted towards these ideological groups. Now the government has to concentrate on developmental activities. For that there is no administration, virtually there is no administration there. So the administration has to be strengthened, the developmental works have to be initiated, the government has to monitor this, the central government is money, state government has also initiated developmental programs, but it has to be a three-pronged approach.
Right.
Security measures, developmental works, administration. Right. At the same time, a channel of communication should be opened with the Maoists so that they should be brought back to the mainstream and they can be asked to join them in the efforts of
Mr. Singh, do you agree with Mr. Pusty there, what he said? Are you in agreement or do you have a different take on that?
No, I broadly agree with him. And about development, I think coming from Orissa as he does, he would know better. And he says there is hardly any administration in the remote areas. We have to take his statement at the face value. He says, and when there is no administration, there can't be development. Mr. Panda says there has been a lot of development activity. Maybe they have planned development activities, and maybe to some extent it has happened also, but not to the extent people would expect, or not to the extent the funds were earmarked for the purpose. From the security angle, I would say that the capabilities of the police forces in Orissa, they require a tremendous amount of enhancement, and unfortunately adequate attention has not been paid to that, and the police find themselves quite unequal to the Maoist challenge in the affected areas.
Let's put the same question to Panda. Panda, my panelists in the studio say that there might have been some developmental initiative, but it's not reaching the targeted, the core constituency that it was supposed to. Do you agree with that? Has the state government failed in that respect? Do you agree?
Let me give you some specific examples of the developmental work that has happened.
Please.
For example, hostels have been built for tribal school children, which today benefit between 1 lakh and 2 lakh tribal school children. So the school retention rate, the dropout rate has dropped dramatically. So this is something which will pay off in the next 10 to 15 years as these children pass out from school. You may not see the result today. Another example, we see throughout Odisha, not just in the coastal part which is better off, but also in the tribal part, is the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which has been implemented by the state government in virtually every village. Today you have concrete roads. This improves their agriculture economy. The access that tribals today have to markets have become much more attractive for them. In terms of other measures that the state government has taken, for example, the Mamata scheme, where 5,000 rupees is given to pregnant mothers, has dramatically dropped the infant mortality rate that we have. And as you know, the infant mortality rates have always been in the tribal areas, so these are benefiting the most today. So I can give you another half a dozen such examples. The thing is, the results of these will not be shown immediately. We will start seeing the results of these in the next few years.
Right. Right, Mr. Panda. A fair point. We will come back to you in just a bit. Let me come to Mr. Pusty again. What options does the state really have now? And state, by this time I mean Naveen Patnaik's BJD government in Orissa. Where does Mr. Patnaik go from here? A school of thought in the media especially says that the state has already surrendered even before the battle began. And they also seem to think that Chhattisgarh, Mr. Raman Singh is going the same way. Mr. Patnaik has agreed to the Maoist demands. Have we lost the game before it even began? The Maoists have struck in Garhi Charoli again today. 10 people have been abducted, 2 have been killed again.
Yeah. So I don't say that we have lost the game. Now you see the pertinent question is that you just raised, what will, where will you go from now here? So the question is, so now how to handle this situation? Because now he has been abducted, he has been released, the government has the government negotiation with them, and they have in the process they have released some prisoners. So now the question arises, what will do from here? So the same situation may be repeated, whether the government will release more prisoners. So now my point is, the center and the state, they should revisit their anti-Maoist policy or the strategy, whatever they are adopting, and in course they will handle their situation in such a way that such situation does not repeat. So that's my point.
Right. Mr. Singh, from a security point of view, since you have spent time, a lifetime in the BSF, would you agree that there is no strategy in place? We are kind of confused when it comes to either the state governments or the central government. Are they confused about what strategy to employ when dealing with insurgents like the Maoists?
We have a strategy in place, and there are documents there. During the former Home Minister's time, there was a 14-point policy document which was circulated. Then Mr. Chidambaram came with clear hold and develop that three-pronged approach. Unfortunately, it seems that there are leaders at the center who either do not wish to see Mr. Chidambaram successful, or they have a different take of the Naxalite problem. Whatever it be, it has meant confusion at the center, and Mr. Chidambaram finds himself restrained and in his initiative and in his efforts to deal with the problem. And that gets reflected at the state level. Now, at state level, we find that every state chief minister has his own perception. Mr. Raman Singh is going all out. Mr. Nitish Kumar is half development and half-hearted armed action. Mamata Banerjee, earlier she said they are our friends, now she is having a confrontation with them. Orissa has been, well, I would say very, very lukewarm in its handling of the Naxal problem, and they are paying price for that. At the state level, we find a huge divergence in the appreciation of the problem and in their approach to the problem. This is a major.
Make a point. We'll go to Mr. Panda.
The Prime Minister has said that Maoism is the single biggest problem in the country. I mean, repeatedly he has said. But where is the coordinated policy? So the center has not done so far anything. They have called meetings, but there is no coordinated policy approach or any strategy to handle such kind of situations.
Right. Mr. Panda, very quickly, sir, if you could, Mr. Prakash Singh, former DG of the BSF, seems to think that the Naveen Patnaik government in Orissa, the response to Maoism, the approach to Maoism have been lukewarm. Do you agree with the school of thought in the media which says Mr. Patnaik has actually surrendered to the Maoists? Would you, or do you want to respond to that?
Well, I don't agree with that for the following two reasons. One is, over the past 2-3 years, as the Home Minister has been convening meetings, particularly with respect to left-wing extremism, you will find that the Odisha has participated consistently, whereas some other states have not always participated. Odisha and the center have had very frank exchanges of views, and without cooperation, this decrease in the incidents would not have happened in Odisha. And as Mr. Singh himself pointed out, I think the Home Minister faces more opposition to his ideas from within his own party than he does from any of the regional parties. Now, of course, there is always room for improvement. I talked earlier about the developmental issues as far as some of the security measures. I think perhaps we need to have a national view about coordination, and sometimes that debate has been hijacked by some other areas. For example, on NCTC, there has been a wrong impression given that Odisha is lukewarm. Odisha has maintained that NCTC ought to be implemented with some changes, with a few amendments. And I personally have been saying that at the least, like the UK and the US has, the federal agency should come under parliamentary supervision to begin with.
Right.
Otherwise, there is no fundamental objection to what the center is planning.
Right. Mr. Panda, we'll take another short breather. We'll come back for the third segment of the show. Stay with us. We'll take another breather. We'll discuss the very important, the larger issue of a national policy in place for tackling insurgencies like the Maoist insurgencies in the interior parts of the country. Lots more to come on The Big Picture. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture. Mr. Panda, very quickly, I'll come to you and ask you this. Intelligence agencies are saying, there are reports from the intelligence agencies saying that Maoist rebels are preparing to expand their base and take it forward to border towns and villages and townships from the jungles. There are reports of dalams or guerrilla squads taking the fight to the security forces. Do you see this as a sort of an aggressive counter move by the rebels to whatever security initiatives we've tried in the past?
Well,
That's the question is to you, Mr. Panda. Do you think that coming out of the jungles into townships and villages, do you see this, the operation, the guerrilla forces, the dalams coming to towns and taking the fight to the security forces as an aggressive counter to our security positions in the past, or what we've tried to do with the security forces with the rebels?
well, that is actually what you've described would be the classic left-wing extremist model going back to what Che Guevara did 50, 60 years ago, starting in the rural areas and then coming to the urban areas. But that presumes that, first of all, they have succeeded in the rural areas. And as we have seen, in recent years, the incidents have actually started reducing in the rural areas. Now, I don't think it will be easy to implement such a strategy in India because I'm not sure how much support there is in the general public, either in rural or in urban India, for this kind of activity. I think as state governments and as the national government gets more focused on the issue, and not just from a security perspective, but also from a developmental perspective, because both need to go hand in hand,
Right.
I think we will see the addressing of the original concerns that the Maoists had, because of which the movement started. So I am a little bit more optimistic than what your question seemed to suggest.
Right, right. Mr. Pusty, the larger issue, of course, seems to be that the absence of a national policy in place for hostage situations, be it the Maoist, be it some other insurgents, which leaves the state governments free to actually go along with whatever whims or fancies they might have. There's a lack of coordination there. There's no single strategy in place. This creates an erratic response whenever these situations come about. Do you think there is a need for a national strategy?
Yeah, you see, when this incident started, this is a month long. The incident is going on for a month.
32 days.
Yeah, yes. So what happened here? There was no coordination between the center and the states. I don't remember, because you say I have seen in Parliament the BJD members, even some Congress members, there is this issue in Parliament. But the center adopted a lukewarm response to the state. So I don't blame the center or the state, but there is no this situation to how to handle a situation like this. But in my view, this is the high time that there should be some kind of strategy to deal with such situation, and both the center and the state, they should come on board and they should deal with the situation, and the matter should not be left to the state government alone, because it is all responsibility of the center as well, and it is not Orissa specific issue, because other states are also involved. Chhattisgarh is a border state, Andhra is a border state. So this is this. So there should be proper policy, hostage policy, and at the same time it should be in place.
Fair point. From a security point of view, sir, what would you say that the government, the state government and the central government need to do right now to curb, I don't want to call it a menace, there are different connotations for that, this insurgency? What is needed right now in terms of a national policy to deal with such hostage situations?
See, firstly, you need to have a national policy, which we don't have. And within that broad framework, every state has to fine-tune that policy to its to the special features and the peculiar conditions in the state, because the movement has different shades in different states. So it has to be fine-tuned to that. And then the overall planning of operations has to be done. And I think we need to get out of this straitjacket that Orissa police will operate in Orissa, Andhra police will operate in Orissa. I think we need to define areas which are affected, and then those areas have to be covered by forces moving, if necessary, across the borders. I mean, I think we need to get out of the box and rethink about our strategy. So far, it is all state specific. I mean, and what happens if the Maoists, if they find that there is weakness in one state, they would commit incidents here and move over to the other state.
Fair point, fair point. We'll close the show with Mr. Panda. If you could, last word on the show to you, Mr. Panda. Where does Mr. Naveen Patnaik especially go from here? You're close to the Chief Minister there. What is the party strategy now that Jina Hikaka has been released? Are are you going to start, is your state government going to start back-channel diplomacy, if I could call it that, with the Maoists, or are you going to maintain a rather aggressive approach given the fact that these high-level targets, high-level kidnappings are rampant?
This new turn that the Maoist tactics have taken, I think, are not just limited to Odisha. So as I said, there has to be a pan-Indian approach to dealing with this, and we have to discuss this amongst the various affected states and the center. As far as Odisha is concerned, we continue to have an open attitude to discussions with any Maoist group that is willing to give up violence. Now, if violence is not going to be given up, that doesn't mean that we'll stop developmental work. We will continue to address some of the concerns that the Maoists have raised in terms of development, in terms of the improvement of the lives of the tribals in those districts. And as far as security measures go, we will continue to have dialogue with the center and with other states to evolve an approach that suits not just Odisha but the whole country.
Right, Mr. Panda. Calibrated approach towards the insurgency is what you're suggesting. Of course, that's where we end the show today. I'd like to thank my guest, Mr. Pusty. Thank you for coming here. Mr. Prakash Singh, also Mr. Jai Panda. Thank you for coming on the show. Of course, what came out of the discussion today is a calibrated policy approach is needed. We also understand from today's discussion that on the national level, there has to be a national policy in place which deals with such situations, hostage situations, or otherwise, whether it be the Maoists or any other sort of rebels. A better coordination between the state and the center is the need of the hour. That's all the time we have from The Big Picture tonight. Until next time when we get you another edition of The Big Picture with another issue, goodbye, good night, and thanks for watching.